going in on Teams meeting. I'll start the meet. We will remain seated because we're videoing this. I'll start the meeting with our prayer. We ask for guidance and blessing on this council. May the true needs and well-being of our communities be our concern. Help us, who serve as leaders, to remember that all our decisions are made in the best interests of the people, culture and environment of the Corangamite Shire. Amen. I'll do the welcome to country. We acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we're meeting. We pay our respects to their elders, past and present. Welcome to all the councillors. We'll welcome all those who are joining us online, and I'll just read through the list of councillors that we have. We have Councillor Simon Illingworth, Councillor Joe Beard, Councillor Helen Durant, Councillor Leslie Brown, Councillor Ruth Restrain, and myself, the Mayor, Neil Trotter. We also have with us the Andrew Mason, CEO. With live streaming, we hope that we've been testing it out this morning in our briefing, so we hope that it will go seamlessly. If for any reason we have to go offline, the meeting, if the meeting is suspended due to technical difficulties and is unable to continue, we may adjourn the meeting to a later date. We hope that doesn't happen. Mr. Mason, do we have any apologies?
Mr. Mayor, we've got no apologies for today's meeting.
Thank you. Mr. Mason, do we have any declarations of conflict of interest?
Mr. Mayor, I've got two declarations of conflict of interest. One from Councillor Illingworth in relation to item 7.1, which is obviously the budget conflict of interest, and one from Councillor Restrain in relation to item 7.4, which is the stimulus package policy.
Thank you. Confirmation of minutes. Can I have a councillor confirm the minutes be read as accepted as read? Councillor Restrain, do we have a seconder? Councillor Beard. Councillors, all those, any discussion on the minutes at all? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? I'll just read through those because we're live streaming. We have Councillor Illingsworth, affirmative. Councillor Beard, affirmative. Councillor Durant, affirmative. Councillor Brown, affirmative. Councillor Australian, affirmative. And myself, affirmative. Moving on to deputations and presentations. Mr. Mason, do we have any deputations?
No, Mr. Mayor.
We'll move on to officer's report, item number 7. Item 7.1, draft budget 2020. We have a conflict of interest for this first item. Councillor Illingworth. Mr. Welsh will put Councillor Illingworth into the lobby. Thank you. Mr. Ray, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. Councillors, the draft budget for 2021, which you'll consider this afternoon, contains an item in which Councillor Illingworth has declared a conflict of interest.
We've lost you. Lost you, Mr. Ray.
I'll recommence that address. Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, thank you, and through you. The councillors, the draft budget for 2021, which you'll consider this afternoon, contains an item in which Councillor Illingworth has declared a conflict. Propose that item be considered subject to council considering the budget in its entirety. The item is in respect of a contribution to the South West Assembly of Sport of $5,000. Councillor Illingworth is a member of the board. that item is determined by council, councils are then able to vote on the draft 2020 budget in its entirety. Mayor, the recommendation is before you.
Thanks, Mr. Ray. Councillors, we have the recommendation that council approves 5,000 contribution to the Southwest Academy of Sport for inclusion in the 2020 budget. Councillors, have anyone to speak to the motion? Would someone like to move the motion? Councillor Durant, do I have a seconder? Councillor Durant, Councillor Gastrain proposed the motion. Councillor Durant second the motion. Councillor Gastrain.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think this allocation in our budget of $5,000 to the Southwest Academy of Sport is certainly well worth it. A number of young Corangamite athletes take part in this program. They come and do a briefing with council every year, and we get to hear about the range of sports that they're involved in and the benefits that they receive from being part of the academy. So I'm more than happy to have this included in our budget, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Gastrain. Councillor Durand.
I have nothing to add. Thank you, Mayor.
Councillors, is there any further comment on this? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? If you could leave your hands up too while we count the votes. Councillor Beard, affirmative. Councillor Durant, affirmative. Councillor Brown, affirmative. Councillor Gastrain, affirmative. And myself, affirmative. It's unanimous. Thank you. Mr. Welsh, can you bring Councillor Illingworth back into the fold? Thanks.
And Councillor Illingworth is back.
Right, we'll move on to item 7.2, the draft budget. Mr. Ray, thank you.
Mayor, thank you. And through you, councillors, the draft budget for 2021 is presented for your consideration this afternoon. The budget, which also includes the fees and charges schedule, has been prepared in the context of the current environment, whilst ensuring ongoing service provision. That context is in respect of the COVID-19 pandemic and in accordance with the direction provided to the CEO back in March 2020. Councillors, the budget proposes a nil increase in average rates and charges, a modest increase in the waste management charge, total budget commitments of $49 million, a capital works program of $14 million is proposed also, with an emphasis on renewing and upgrading existing infrastructure, plus the commencement of the 12 Apostles Trail. $2.5 million in operating projects are also proposed, councillors. Those projects, which are just over 50, are detailed in the budget document. The budget also includes $2.5 million for community and business recovery and economic stimulus in response to the COVID-19 crisis. Councillors, coupled with the 0% rate rise, this represents a $3 million effort by council over 2021 in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Council, it's important to note that with respect to the nil increase in rates and charges, as revaluations occur annually, ratepayers may receive an increase or decrease above 0%. The forecast financial position at the end of the financial year for 2021 are consistent with Council's currently adopted long-term financial plan, with a strong cash position and a continuing debt-free status. Councillors, it's also important to note there are some financial risks associated with the budget. These are documented in the report, and financial risks, should they come to bear, will be addressed during the course of the year. Councillors, it's proposed, subject to your decision this afternoon, the budget will be placed on public exhibition for a 28-day period and submissions called for. It's also proposed that submitters be able to present to those submissions, should they choose to do so, on the 9th of June. Council will then be asked or requested to adopt the budget on the 23rd of June or without amendment. Mr. Mayor and councillors, I'm pleased to present to you the draft budget for your consideration this afternoon.
Thanks, Mr. Ray. Councillors, draft budget is before we can have someone move the Councillor Gistrain. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Beard. Councillor Gistrain.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think councillors and council staff can agree that this year's budget discussions and budget is just one that, like no other, that we've had. It takes many months of planning and putting our budget together, and we'd effectively completed all our budget discussions by early March, just as the impacts of the virus started to hit. So, as councillors are aware, the 23rd of March meeting in Timboon, there were new assumptions made around the budget relating to the zero rate rise, and as well as the economic stimulus package of $2.5 million. We're certainly in a very fortunate financial position, which I'm very grateful for. Previous councils had paid off our debt, and this council has continued to maintain that position. So currently we have no borrowings and none are anticipated. So we were able to draw back a number of projects, push them out 12 months or so, to make sure that we're able to deliver this stimulus package as well as the zero rate increase. As Mr. Ray mentioned, we do experience annual valuations, and the valuation is completed as of the 1st of January in 2020. So any impact that is going to affect valuations won't in fact be impacted until next year. So along with some increases in waste charges, a lot of people will see a different figure on their rate notice. It may be higher, it may be lower. Of noting is the fact that the farm rate has continued to drop and has been dropped by another 0.5% to bring it back to 89% of the general rate. As councillors, I think we're very mindful of the impacts around the compounding of this amount that we're reducing in our budget and the effect on future budgets. In saying that, though, the budget does contain operating projects of $33.28 million and, importantly, $14 million in capital works. There's nearly $7 million in roads, drainage and bridges, and we're very well aware that these are high priorities for our ratepayers and our residents. $2.3 million in recreation, leisure and community facilities. Grant programs have continued for community groups, and importantly, we've been able to maintain service levels, which is exceptionally important to all of our communities. We maintain a reliance on external grants through Roads to Recovery and the financial assistance grants from federal government. We're very, very grateful for those. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to complete the number of projects that we do each year. I think, however, that the current position of federal and state government finances with regards to the measures of the coronavirus will make access to additional grants funding in the future much more difficult. So I'd like to thank the finance team under Mr. Ray, Adam Taylor, all the managers and all the staff who've absolutely pulled this budget together in just a few short weeks. And I'd also like to thank councillors for the respectful manner that we've had the discussions around this budget. And I'd certainly encourage members of the public to have a look at the budget, and if they'd like to, take the opportunity to make a submission. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Strain. Councillor Beard.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Gistrain. As like our Mayor, you've been a great leader throughout all of this as our Deputy Mayor, so thank you for those words. Obviously, I'll be probably reflecting some of what you've already said because it's very important, so I'll go through what I've written down anyway. It's interesting, one of the values that this council set out originally when we set up our council plan was leadership. And right throughout this organisation, right from our CEO, right through to our every staff that's on the ground, and then council, of course, has shown leadership throughout not only the past 2 years following the fires, but more importantly, even during this recent pandemic this year. All staff have contributed to not only this particular draft budget, but the one that obviously we'd already worked up before March and we were nearly ready to hit the ground with. But what we're talking about now goes right throughout this organisation, something that I'm really proud of. It's certainly, I think, and it's been noted that we've always tried to take that business as usual approach. And I think to our ratepayers, I would hope that they would have noticed that significantly, that, you know, even though so many things have been impacted, basically business has been operating as usual in terms of council, and that's something that we should be really proud of. Obviously, the first draft budget that we had pulled together, I'd like to say was a really, really good looking budget. and one that I was really proud of, because so many projects were in amongst that would be getting done right across our shire. But obviously we did what we had to do, and that was obviously redo the budget. Not very often you have to do two. So we're very thankful to the staff, as Councillor Gaustrain had noted, to pull that together in a couple of weeks is truly remarkable, and to the degree that they have with the most significant savings, it's incredible. To go to a 0% rate, no increase is amazing. And obviously we've already mentioned about the farm rate once again being reduced by 0.5%, which is obviously in line with our rating strategy. Retaining all our services has been an absolute priority, and to have no debt and no new borrowings, again, is something that we can be really proud of. Maintaining our assets is something that we're always really strong about, and obviously it's in line with our asset renewal program, and obviously that is continuing. There's been significant road-related projects throughout this draft budget, and even though it may not be the funding that potentially we had in the first draft budget, it's certainly our advocacy to obtain further funding will not stop. That's something this council has always done, is that's advocate strong for better roads within our region. So our ratepayers can be rest assured that that will continue no matter what the climate is happening around. I guess the challenging part is certainly going to be, in light of the federal and state budgets, our future grant funding opportunities are likely to be severely impacted and limited for that matter, which obviously when you're in a rural council like ours, we rely heavily upon those. So it's going to be interesting to see what projects we can get done, depending on what grants we can actually obtain into the future. Projects I'd like to particularly make note of are the $105,000, which has been put towards a traineeship and apprenticeship program, the implementation of our youth strategy, which is obviously currently underway, if for any of you that have been out there looking at that or participating in that. And a highlight personally for me has been, and it's such a small amount, but $20,000 to a skate park upgrade here in Cobden, which was actually initiated by one of our young community members. And anyone who knows me, I get quite excited when young people come up with ideas. So it was great to be able to put that project into the books. So it proves that we're continuing to invest into our youth, investing into our future. So I thank Council for the support with that. Health and wellbeing, that's a plan that particularly the new council will have to do. That's an obligation for the new council, and it's great that we've put money aside for that. I think now more than ever, that is a space that will be continually evolving when, you know, considering the impacts that people are feeling now. I think there will be a significant role for Corangamite Shire to play in that space. I'd also like to make note of master planning for our recreation reserves across various locations across the Shire. This will obviously help to inform and support those facilities and user groups well into the future. So I think that will be a really welcome addition to across our communities. $50,000 to roadside tree removal, and there's also some money put aside for expansion on our emergency planning. Of this was all on the back of actions following the Southwest fires. So it's good to know that we can still contribute to support those actions following that significant event. Cobden Streetscape, which is going through its community consultation process at the moment. I will foreshadow with you, councillors, and I have made mention of this in the past, that we have for many years had $300,000 earmarked for this particular project. I did show that I was a bit worried about that, and I think following the stages of that consultation now, we can, and some projected potential costings, it's coming to light that 300,000 may not be enough. So as that process evolves, I will potentially be coming back to council that we can have further discussions in that space. But obviously I'll be looking forward to feedback from our community on that one. So in closing, just we're being responsible to our communities, including our staff, in the fact that we've had no job losses. Not all councils around our area particularly, unfortunately, have been able to say that. But retaining each one of those important staff members is to continue on with those really important services that we provide. and to continue on with our maintaining and looking after our facilities that our people want and deserve. So thank you, and I'm happy to second that recommendation, Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Beard. Councillors, further comment? Councillor Durant? Okay.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. Look, I'd venture to say that this is probably the most significant budget that Council has proposed, and certainly it was not the one that we were anticipating when we closed our, what we thought was the last of our budget discussions early in March, as Councillor Gastrein has mentioned. I won't go into the ins and outs of the contents of the budget. I think Councillor Beard has done a good job in doing that. What I would like to say is that our country is in a period of great economic uncertainty and volatility. Council's strong economic position prior to the pandemic has allowed us to respond quickly and responsibly while still maintaining a stable financial forecast, so we can continue to meet our obligations now and into the future, which is so important. I think this is a budget that we as councillors can be incredibly proud of. There have been lots of hard decisions that have had to be made, particularly between the beginning of March and when we met in Timburn and decided what we needed to do. There have been lots of compromises, and we've shown a willingness to see the bigger picture as we prioritised each and every project and went through every single project individually to see if we could afford it. I'd like to thank the council officers who have put so much work into putting this document together and who have responded so well to the challenges that have been involved. So thank you very much.
Councillor Illingworth?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I ran for council to represent the families, the battlers, farmers, whose voices I felt sometimes I didn't feel represented. These people know hardship, success, failure and disappointment. They strive valiantly, they focus on growth and a desire to learn, and they embrace life's challenges and persist in the face of setbacks and adversity. They learn from negative criticism and they're inspired by the success of others. These people are the doers of our society, whose only reward often is a pat on the back. You won't find them hobnobbing or pontificating over drinks and nibbles. They're fair people and they tell it how it is. They often volunteer, share and give credit where credit is due. These are the people that I proudly represent, and that is indeed what I've done in the deliberations with this budget. The budget stimulus package, the budget and stimulus package, I should say, they're not miracles. This has been a very hard slog. And indeed, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. And coronavirus is a big challenge. And it's obvious that if you look around, that some people aren't necessarily up to it that should be leading within Australia. It's a little bit like the cop removing their uniform and mingling with the crowd. On the flip side of that, I've seen some terrific efforts from some of our politicians, both nationally and the state level. Indeed, I've worked my ass off since this threat started. I've spoken to people, I've researched, and I've thought about the best way forward for our communities. I'm buoyed by this because I've found that we are, and knew that we are, strong people. We have been beaten to our knees at times and fought our way back, and that includes things like the fires. You know, we've lived on the smell of an oily rag for times, but we've made do. We've fought flood and fire, as I've said, but we always find a way back to get up. Coronavirus is a different challenge, but the path back to where we were is exactly the same as the path we've trodden before. We know this path well, and we as a region, and indeed our Shire, should be confident that we can tackle this challenge. I guess the situation here is that we have removed all the bullshit, the political correctness, pretenders and the virtue signalling that we've seen over many years leading up to this. A lot of those people that are involved in that have ducked for cover. And that's ultimately what happens when things start getting real. And things have got real here. Indeed, this slog, this budget, really started 4 years ago when we argued and paid back the big debt, the $4 million debt carried over from previous councils. That's not a complaint, it's not a criticism. But our constituents wanted more grip and a lot less spin. I addressed some of the cultural expenditure issues that lingered, and we all reassessed expenditure. We found some failed schemes and we shut them down. I would like to particularly thank Andrew and Dave Ray, because in just 2 years, we had no debt, and indeed we still have no debt. Nevertheless, the challenges keep coming, and it was only just weeks ago we were arguing over whether people purchase electric cars or greenhouse gas emissions measuring tools, you know, or rolling out free electric car charging stations, I assume, for tourists. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not anti-climate, but realistically, climate change plus environmental gimmicks and gadgets doesn't equal a fixed planet. And so that's the thing that we have to look at. We need to actually look at also the emergency management scenario and put more money into that. This job, as you all know, isn't beer and skittles. So I suppose I ask you, how relevant is this commentary to the budget that we have and indeed the stimulus that we're about to talk about? Well, I can tell you it is very relevant, because you cannot stimulate an economy if you've blown all the money on gadgets and virtue signalling. And this Shire has done a terrific job to avoid some of those pushes over the last 4 years. Now, before my greenie friends lampoon me as some sort of a flat earther, I'm not. The problem is not whether we tackle climate change, for example, it's how we do it. Climate change itself is a bit of a minefield. You know, it's full of wacky rebates and false statistics, greenwash, cons and scams. I heard the other day that Al Gore opened a new sustainability fund in the Cayman Islands. The only effective way for us to tackle climate is to plant more trees, reduce population, and for the cities to reduce their energy use. Of course, we in regional areas can also reduce energy, but we're not the problem. We feed the world, and that takes energy. We can afford this stimulus because this council isn't spending $100,000 every 5 years pointlessly measuring greenhouse gas emissions or buying dud electric cars, or indeed floodlighting, you know, the Camperdown clock. Honestly, it's fueled by coal electricity. So I guess the point is this: we can open the floodgates and kickstart the stimulus package and the budget, because we've made those hard decisions over 4 years. And ultimately, once coronavirus hit, we got to work, we looked at the history, specifically looked at the Great Ocean Road build and how it provided hope for people. I created 5 questions, a filter, if you like, that also looked at and put through that filter was all these stimulus infrastructure spending, and so we could rate the bang for buck that we had. And using that measure, we had things like the 12 Apostles Trail that looks like it leapfrogs everything else because it's manageable in this coronavirus, siloing workers, and it's over 19 kilometres of health and safety issues, which are all covered. Local jobs. The newspapers jumped at it, social media jumped at it, the locals have jumped at it. I think the big thing here is that if we can fill our accommodation, our tourist accommodation, with workers that are doing these particular jobs, then we've actually solved a lot of our problems. Here we are on the 12th of May 2020 with a 34-page stimulus package, of which I am immensely proud. This includes $3.7 million of employment package and $2.3 million of which has come from the state government. And I thank them very much. This is a big win for the Corangamite Shire and a big thrill for me personally over many years. And as I've said before, I'm pretty bloody sure we've got this covered. I recommend it.
Thanks, Councillor Illingworth. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, and through you, Mr Mayor. Today's meeting is a very important moment in the history of the Corangamite Shire. We have a budget without borrowings, zero rate rise, sufficient funding to continue our works programs and the many other programs that provide for our community. We are moving through the stages of an unprecedented pandemic following floods in 2011, fires in 2019, with the financial certainty of being able to continue to support our community. We will be able to get started on long-awaited projects such as the 12 Apostles Trail Stage 1 construction, new programs such as the traineeship and apprenticeship program, support for the Skipton Skate Park, a smaller amount than Cobden Skate Park, I understand, and the COVID-19 economic stimulus and support package, to name a few, continuing to provide a strong commitment to a high standard of services. This budget has something for everyone. I'd like to commend our finance team for their thorough preparation and guidance in developing the budget, and I support the recommendation. Thank you.
Councillors, any further comment? Yeah, I'd just like to add, preparing this year's budget has been like no other. COVID-19 has had a huge impact on our budget and deliberations. I'd like to thank the councillors for their contributions over the past few weeks. They have shown a willingness to cooperate and contribute and to develop a budget that meets the community need. That means that some of the projects that they and their communities have wanted have had to be put on hold. Not to meet those demands during this crisis, but we've met the challenge before us head on. In an election year, that's not an easy ask, but our councillors have been very forthcoming in setting the directions they believe that the community requires in a very selfless manner. I'd also like to pay tribute to all our employees for their forbearance and understanding at this time. The finance team have spent many hours burning the midnight oils to put in place the measures to meet the community need and to help the wheels of the council keep turning over. This budget is very much a business as usual approach. Probably some of the preparation that's been done has been a long time coming. As Councillor Illingworth alluded to, I'd go beyond even 4 years. I'd go back to probably 8 years when Councillor Chris O'Connor was the mayor, when we decided to try and reduce the debt levels of council and become debt free. It started probably 8 years ago and was a very long process, and it's borne fruit over that time. It's something you can't do quickly. But it's important. It's also important to have a budget by which we can move forward. But in times like this, it's vitally important to be able to evaluate and keep track of our financial position as we move forward. It may be necessary to review our budgetary performance far more often as the year progresses. We have endeavoured to maintain our capital works program. This is vital in order to maintain our long-term sustainability. We have also allocated substantial funding to meet community and economic recovery in response to COVID-19. The community have the opportunity to comment on the draft budget, which will come before the June meeting as usual. Each and every one of us who live in this municipality are affected by this pandemic. We believe this budget is a way forward. We can expand some of the goodwill we have accumulated over the past few years and put that back into the community in a time of need. We're also very grateful for the support we have received from the state and federal governments. The 2.5 Work for Victoria's package is going to be invaluable for us when we team that with our own funding. So I am fully supportive of the recommendation. Any further comment, Councillor Australian?
Oh,
Yes.
thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just one quick comment. In the past, we've always had hard copies of the budget available at our local libraries, which are unfortunately closed at the moment, as well as currently customer service here at the Civic Centre. I'm just wondering if it's possible to have discussions with perhaps post offices where we'll be able to leave some hard copies for people to have a look at.
Mr. Ray?
Mr. Mayor, we can make inquiries with local post offices to see if that is an opportunity they're able to take up on our behalf to make available hard copies. Thanks for the question.
Yeah. Right. Well, if there's no further comment, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? We have affirmative from Councillor Beard, affirmative from Councillor Durant, affirmative from Councillor Brown, affirmative from Councillor Gristain, affirmative from Councillor Illingworth, and affirmative from me. That's unanimous. We'll move on to item 7.3, COVID-19 financial hardship policy. Mr. Ray, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. And through you, councillors, this report recommends the adoption of the COVID-19 financial hardship policy. The purpose of the policy provides a framework for financial relief to individuals, businesses and organisations who need assistance from the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. The policy establishes the guidelines for assessing eligibility for hardship based on the principles employed by the federal government. Policy stipulates eligible applicants will be able to access deferred payment options and interest waivers. The policy also makes provision for non-rate debtors to be waived subject to eligibility by council. Proposed the policy operate on a temporary basis, and if not reviewed by 30 November of this year, the policy will sunset. Councillors, the recommendation is before you to adopt the policy.
Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Murray. Councillors, recommendation is before you. Can I have someone move the recommendation? Councillor Durant, I think you're first, and Councillor Brown, seconder. Councillor Durant.
Thank you, Mayor. There's no doubt that many individuals and businesses are doing it really tough and are struggling financially at present. Council has always had a financial hardship policy, but this one goes just that little bit further towards offering a helping hand to those who need it most at this time. Hopefully by offering generous repayment plans, deferrals on rate payments and overdue interest, and certain fee waivers, this may go a little way to helping those who have been most adversely affected. I'm very happy to move the motion. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Durant. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. The sound financial management of this council has enabled us to be able to provide support to our community who are enduring financial hardship through no fault of their own. This financial hardship policy allows for the waiving of interest on rates and charges, waiver on rents due while this policy remains in force and they remain eligible for JobKeeper. This policy will give those eligible some financial assistance and support while we move through this transition time from isolation and closure to business as usual. It is sensible for the policy to be reviewed no later than 30th of November 2020, when we hope that business will be back to business as usual. I support the recommendation. Thank you.
Councillor Brown. Councillor, further comment? Councillor Illingworth.
Yeah, just quickly, I certainly urge the people of Corangamite Shire not to let pride get in the way of asking for assistance, whether it's this or anything else.
Thanks, Councillor Illingworth. Councillor, any further comment? Then I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Councillor Beard, affirmative. Councillor Durant, affirmative. Councillor Brown, affirmative. Councillor Gristain, affirmative. Councillor Illingworth, affirmative. And myself, affirmative. It's unanimous. Thank you. We'll move on to item 7.4. I think we have a conflict of interest in this one with Councillor Gristain. Mr. Welsh, can you... thank you. Mr. Neeson, thank you.
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to present this report on the adoption of a COVID-19 economic stimulus and support policy for council. So the COVID-19 pandemic has created one of the biggest challenges for council to respond to in recent times. With forced business closures and changes to operations, coupled with restrictions on how the community can interact with each other, it is essential that council can be responsive to our residents' needs. While a variety of support packages have been offered by both the state and federal government, the aim of council's package is to provide a more localised support to its residents, businesses and ratepayers, and to stimulate the local economy through job creation, grant programs, fee waivers, marketing and promotion, welfare support and social connectivity. As part of the stimulus package, council has been successful in receiving funding through the state government's Working for Victoria initiative, which will see up to 47 short-term jobs created at council. The total value of this economic stimulus and support package is $4.8 million, which will have a profound impact on assisting our community to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic. A recommendation has been brought before you for your consideration.
Thanks, Mr. Neeson. Council, the recommendation is before you. Can I have someone move the recommendation? Councillor Illingworth, seconded Councillor Brown. Councillor Illingworth.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I won't speak for much longer. I've had a fair old whack. I will say to every person in the Shire who works, who has a business, a cafe, in Toowoomba, whatever, to please read the documentation and the things on offer here. You may be surprised as to what it is that you may be able to apply for. There's a number of aspects here that have been well thought out. Thank you, Mr. Neeson. And also you'll certainly keep council on its toes. And that's exactly what we want. We want you to actually apply and see what is relevant to yourselves.
Thanks, Councillor Illingworth. Councillor Brown.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. $2.5 million has been allocated to the financial hardship policy and this economic stimulus support package, an impressive amount of funding we have been able to allocate in this unprecedented pandemic. This policy will stimulate the economy by providing funding for capital work, projects, and we will be able to create up to 47 short-term positions. The waiving of the special charge scheme for selected footpaths throughout the Shire, creating walking loops and town connections, will benefit the local communities and stimulate the economy. Funding for diversification of the way a business operates to offer a new service or change the way they do things creates opportunities for these businesses. Support for traditional advertising, purchase, upgrade existing digital and e-commerce technology, a domestic tourism campaign, welfare, social support and more. This policy is responsible, innovative and supports council's values of respect, integrity, innovation, collaboration, leadership and provides the economic stimulus that is needed right now. I encourage anyone who is eligible to apply and we look forward to that and being able to support you. I therefore support this recommendation. Thank you.
Councillor Brown. Councillors, further comment? Councillor Beard.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. I mean, we should be really proud of the effort the staff have gone into to obviously pull together such a policy as this. I mean, it's pretty significant. I mean, obviously we were able to work all together to find the savings that would enable this sort of projects to be carried out at our grassroots level. Obviously the federal and state governments have played their part and will continue to do so. Never has there been a more important time for us to be able to stand alongside our community members, particularly our business network, and be able to support them in a way that potentially they wouldn't be able to get the help otherwise. I actually think it's really valuable that, as I said, it's grassroots, but for a ratepayer to know that their council has their back, I think that's hopefully something that will really resonate with a lot of these community members. And I really look forward to hearing the feedback. So many people have already provided feedback on what's actually happening within their own backyard in terms of businesses. But I think if they can continue to keep in contact with our economic development staff. I think that's really important. So we continue to keep our finger on the pulse as this continues to evolve. I think that's the best thing about this document too, is it's flexible. We can basically see how things are in a few months' time and see if we're on the right track. I've been talking to a few business people, and I know particularly in the trades industry, they're not so much worried about themselves at the moment, but in 6 to 8 months' time, they said life is going to be really tough for them. So that's particularly in the building industry. So I think this document, this policy will enable flexibility, and so each of our community can feel supported in some way or another. I think in light of the comments, for anyone out there that would have heard our state treasurer make around the responsibility of local councils to look after their own, I think this is certainly something that we're doing. We're being responsible. We are being innovative, which is something that this council's always strived to do. But as I said, we're not forgetting those people that we represent. That's the most important thing. Obviously, it is quite business centric, which is obviously all about economic stimulus, but we can't forget another thing that's going to transpire often in the background is the notable increase in family violence, gambling and alcohol use. And so I think it's great that, you know, hopefully these opportunities will arise where we can also play our role in playing that support for those people in that community as well. Obviously, there's certainly a lot of announcements coming out of the federal government, particularly around mental health, multi-million-dollar initiatives coming out of there, but how that actually looks for us here in Corangamite, we're still yet to see that. So I think there is a particular role that we need to play in terms of our social welfare here in Corangamite. I'm really grateful for that application, for that grant, for the Working Victoria funding that has come through. I mean, that is such a huge coup for this area. To be able to look at putting on 47 employees, that is so significant. And I really hope that some of that employment can be directed at particularly the long-term recovery plan. We're going to have such a long recovery ahead of us. And it's still so unknown, but I think there needs to be an emphasis on staff allocated to specifically see over that recovery plan in whichever space that may be, whether it's business or community. But I'd like to make sure that we'll see that some of that is addressed. I don't want to also disregard the fact in the recommendation it does, and this will actually this will make some residents happy, where there's been provision for 2 footpaths that were under special charge schemes that have now been incorporated into this policy that had actually been adopted by council to proceed a project in Cobden and Lismore, where two footpaths were going to be built and paid for by a special charge scheme. We've now shifted those into this policy where they'll get done as part of this funding. Obviously, that has occurred during the COVID time. So I thank the officers for incorporating that. I think that's really fair that those residents also get to be part of this. Thank you.
Thanks, councillors. Any further comment? Yeah, I'd just like to add that there are many individuals and businesses who will be experiencing financial hardship as a result of the pandemic. We would encourage people who are impacted to contact council so that alternative payment options can be explored. And just another aside is we're fortunate to have some projects that were shovel ready, more or less sitting on the shelf ready to go. They've been costed, and so we were able to include those types of projects that strengthened our case to get this money. So it's very fortunate that we have projects in the pipeline that we wanted to achieve, and it's by doing that it has also assisted us to win this very, very valuable impetus to the grant money. When coupled with our own money, it'll make sure that it goes a long way, and we get a lot of you would get the best value for that money that's going to be expended. So without any further ado, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? So we have affirmatives from Councillor Beard, Councillor Durant, Councillor Brown, Councillor Illingworth and myself. Councillor Gistrain had a conflict of interest on this matter. So I declare the motion passed. Invite Councillor Australian back to the meeting. Councillor Australian, I'd like to thank everyone for their attendance today. This has been the first time that we've done this remotely and over Teams platform. So hopefully it's gone well, and hopefully we can continue to do this at some time in the future. So thank you for your attendance today, and we'll sign off. Thank you.